There we go. Now, Claire, I can see you. Can you just give me a thumbs up that you're getting the slide deck? Fantastic. And I've got Jennifer Ward waiting, Claire, as well to speak as our teacher. So thank you. So thanks for the opportunity to talk about the Inquisitive Design and Technology Program. First of all, what is it? It's a sister program offering to our challenge-based inquiry classrooms. And so our challenge-based sort of learning philosophy that it's built around, it's a pedagogical framework grounded in authentic real-world application of learning. We want our kids looking at solving challenges that don't have predetermined solutions. We want to connect that classroom when possible to community experts and resources, and try to get the kids to look at things that are meaningful to them and connect it back to the curriculum. So the audience for these solutions is often hoped to be beyond the classroom, and technology is used as an amplifier for how our students learn. And the end goal here is to develop skills in problem solving, design thinking, collaboration, communication, personal social awareness. So if we look at the graphic that we've got up on the screen, it's really a iterative cycle about engage, investigate, act, share that information, document how it went, and then try to go again on your next area of interest. So that's the philosophy behind it. And it fits into things such as design thinking. If we look at the design thinking process, it's about empathy and understanding your problem and your community. And then it's defining, it's moving to prototyping, and then it's implementing, and then it's back to the empathizing. So it connects in very much, and it connects also into computational thinking and breaking down problems and looking for patterns, and then developing those types of solutions. So what's the structure outside of the philosophy? What's the structure? It's a multi-graded classroom that we have at Drinkwater Elementary in Portable 2. It's approximately half-time in person and then half-time remote off-site. And the model that we've set up is an alternating schedule of 2 days on site and then 3 days off, and then it flips around to 3 days on site and then 2 days off. And students have been invited to bring their own technology if they have it, or they've been provided one-to-one an iPad and a keyboard and a case to use for accessing digital resources and to amplify the learning process. So that's all been put in place. And then sort of the why. Why have we looked at this and moving our challenge-based into the inquisitive design? There was community demand for the program, especially as we entered COVID. Families were looking for something that was not necessarily full-time face-to-face in a building, but that would give us a blended option. And as a district, it gives us another program of choice. And the blended model is something that may continue beyond the pandemic. So it gives us an excellent opportunity for another choice. The framework really supports excellent pedagogy. Fits with the first slide that I talked to. It develops these problem-solving skills in our kids. We've done over the years lots of work on inquiry and assessment. And it supports that work and builds upon it. And it allows our kids to build those technology skills. And importantly, a lot of this aligns to several elements of our strategic plan. So it fits in very nicely. So philosophically, what could this look like when we talk about big ideas? And I just pulled together some samples. This is certainly not where our kids are going to be right now, because they've just started, they've come back from a big break, and we're building some of that stamina. But this is what it can look like as we develop our kids' questioning skills and thinking skills of being a little bit of a tech geek. I'll start with something around our community and coding. So the kids might arrive at an essential question of how could we use coding to improve our community? The challenge might be to develop an app or even a mock-up of an app. And then they would work through some guiding questions of what are all the issues in our community? What do we know about them? How are these issues related to what we're trying to learn in our content area, in our curriculum? And then how can we use technology to help, and where can we learn how to code? And then they'd move into some activities. They'd probably interview community members or reach out. They would do research. They would look at how it connects to their subject, and then they would look at, okay, how do I build a mock-up or something? So I'm not saying at the grade 4 to 7 level we would end up with an app developed, but they may have a concept for an app, and they would go through all of this type of problem solving and questioning. And they could do the same thing around water and conservation. And, you know, what are the issues around water? How does my water consumption impact the world? How do we waste water? And then they could look at how do they move to some solutions. So that's the overall philosophy and how we've got this started at Drinkwater in a district program. And Claire, I'd like to turn this over to our fantastic teacher, Jennifer Ward. She'll now talk to how is she laying the groundwork to start moving our kids forward in her class. So sort of laying the foundation.
Can everyone hear me? Oh, and video. There we go. Can you see me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. So it's actually interesting when you were talking through that, Glenn, because that's exactly where the class is actually going, oddly enough. So we started the year by looking at, I did a free write with all of them because before they go offsite, I needed to know where they were actually at with their writing. And from that stemmed 3 or 4 really interesting ideas. One student wants to travel to Australia, which linked to the book, The Rabbits, which is how we're embedding the Indigenous pedagogy from our teachings from the district. And then we also had other students talking about upcycling and things like that. So based on those free writes as they were, we've started working through some other bigger ideas. A lot of them that came up because we had the election, we were able to Zoom with Sonia and with Rob as well from the parties, from the Green Party and the NDP. And after that, we actually were able to Zoom with a 14-year-old who's volunteering with the Green Party. She had a link with a student in the class. And so they got to hear firsthand input from someone in the community who has been volunteering for 2 years, who has a really strong, or who is a strong advocate for voting, which was excellent. And from there, we've looked at our community. So we're also thinking of me, family, community, and we're looking at what are the bigger issues. And the students know, they know it's housing. They know that we need to nourish our community. So based on all of those pieces, we're looking at the big picture of building empathy and tolerance. And we're doing that through read alouds, we're doing that through activities in the classroom, but we also have a parent of one of the students who is actually a web designer and he creates apps. So our next step is looking at that actual piece. So I don't know what that will look like yet, but what we've done to build up to this is we've done other mini projects. So with the class, because their ages are grades 4 to 7, there's quite a range. And one of the biggest things I noticed right away is we needed to become more social, even though we're during COVID. So we've done a lot of work around problem solving as a class, being critical thinkers. So we've also been using 6 Cedars as a framework for core competencies and being really critical of things that have been presented to us, so we don't just accept them as being perfect the way they are. And the students have really stepped up. They're amazing. I've been so impressed with them. And a lot of the work that they've done has just filtered into everyday life, being citizens, part of the global picture, but also looking at their community and trying to help improve it. Right now, we're not recycling in the classroom because of COVID, so we're trying to find solutions for that, which lends itself to bigger parts. And of course, with anything, with all students, they're very empathetic towards the treatment of the planet, but I'm also trying to build their understanding of other people within our community to help them understand that they might have a perception that isn't necessarily accurate, or that they're rushing to a judgment. So I'm not sure what the app will look like, but that is where we're going with this. And it would be an app that would actually help the community. It would come from the students and the learning they've done. And all of this does link right into our curriculum. So in science, we started with looking at space because it spans so many of the grades. And then for grade 5s, we looked at skeletal systems, but then we looked at how arms join, looked at the Canada arm. Now they're creating their own Canada arm because the next one's done, and it's been up there about 20 years. So they're just going and going and going. And with this, they're developing their problem solving skills together. They're working so much better together than they were in September. They're taking way more risks, and they're much more able to receive feedback. So at first there was not much risk taking at all. People were sort of in a shock mode. We've been building stamina with writing, and we've also been building stamina with learning to persevere, which is a really important part of it. So I can go on all day, but I'm sure you don't need me to. So the other part is just, I've also linked up for where I just saw yesterday, we had an offer to connect with Dolly for a half an hour on Thursday. So I've signed myself up for that. And I always try to link that back to our classroom and our classroom teachings, just as a bigger community, and just respect for our elders and where we're going with developments that can help our community. So I can do much more if you'd like.
Thank you. That was really nice to hear. I've kind of wondered how that program is operating. How many students do you have in the class?
There's currently 12.
12.
Yeah.
And what is your maximum?
I have not heard what the maximum could be. So at this point, I'm not sure of that answer. Yeah.
So the maximum would be our contract limits on a multi-age classroom.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Do any other trustees have some questions? Trustee Hutchins?
Can a student still join this class?
Pardon me?
Can a student still join this class?
Yes, one just started this week, actually. Yes, so she was enrolled before, but she wasn't well, so she stayed home, and they can join in at any time. And I really, there's such a great dynamic that they should have no issues. Yeah, she was quite shy, but she's fine.
Thank you.
And Rob, just to add to that, our expectation is that as our remote transition students, some of them may start to determine that they want a little bit more contact with school rather than just being remote, that this is an ideal transition point. So we would expect this potentially to grow over the year.
Thank you.
Trustee Spilsbury?
Thank you for the presentation. It's very intriguing. Thank you. What I'm wondering is, will the whole class choose one challenge, one issue, or are there several issues embedded in a challenge?
Can I take that, Glenn? Is that okay?
You bet.
Okay. At this point, we've been doing a lot of mini parts. So I've had a lot of open projects where they can go different ways on their own. The Canada Arm project was the first one where we've come together to create one model as a class just to see how they would do. And they've done really well. So I would really like, if we can, to do one class project together, especially working through the community member of the parent, because I think it would be very unified and it would get us to an end product. Whereas if we have too many scattered pieces, I think that could make it more difficult. But it doesn't mean that they couldn't branch out in different ways if they needed to, and the learning went that way. But it would be really nice to have them see a product from the beginning to the end. Because sometimes I find that you can start the project, have great ideas, and then it just fizzles. And I would really like them to have something that they can hold on to. Glenn, do you want to say anything else though?
Sure, Candace, I'll just jump in there. I think philosophically, it's a model of gradual release around the inquiry process. So I would think that Jennifer would probably have a couple whole class where you can get sort of agreement that they've come to consensus, that this is something that they'll move towards. And then as the kids' skills and their thinking and their essential questioning skills grow, then you could see it starting to branch off. You might have 2 or 3 inquiries running, later in the year or in subsequent years. This is certainly not something I see where in a matter of months you've just got, everyone's an expert at this. This is going to be a longer term way of thinking for these kids.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments from trustees? Well, thank you very, very much. It was, like I said, it's really intriguing. It's an intriguing program. It's exciting, actually. So thank you. We appreciated the input.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Mr. Matten, are you ready to come aboard? Not yet.
Yeah, I think Claire's just managing the motion there.
Hey, there I am.
There it is. Hello, Mr. Matten. How are you today? Here you're going to tell us a little bit about our Indigenous education today.
Yeah, I can screen share. Can I grab? There we go. Let me hit the play button here. There. Oh, perfect. Perfect. Good. Just let me grab something here quickly. I'm in a few different places. There we go. All right. Ait Squale. It's good to see everybody. Aquanasilam Nala. I'm glad that you invited me here to kind of chat about Indigenous education. It's been a whirlwind of a day I've had numerous meetings to talk about Indigenous education, it seems. But this will be the culmination of my day. I've got a few things that we just wanted to touch on. We're doing some great work in Indigenous education right now. We're trying out some new things. Despite COVID, we feel like we're moving forward in a number of areas. I just recently, actually, I just got off the Zoom session with a number of our Indigenous Ed staff reviewing our action plan for our strategic plan for Indigenous ways of knowing. And a really good conversation. We talked about a number of the things that actually I'm going to share with you today. The first one I wanted to just touch on briefly, I've shared with, I think, a number of you before in a different session, just talking about our Indigenous outreach teachers. We've got a number of our teachers. This is one of our teachers here. This is Tony. This is at Cowichan Secondary in Quamachin. He's supporting grade 8 through 12 students. Just a reminder, our Indigenous outreach teaching program is for students who are in a position where they or their family are feeling like they're not quite ready to return to school yet. We do have remote learning programs in all of our schools right now. But what we've noticed is that not all of our Indigenous learners are at the same readiness around the remote model, which is primarily online. Claire, can I ask you to do me a favor? Charlie Coleman is going to join me for part of this. As I'm speaking, if you can just add him, that would be great. Charlie Coleman should be in the group there. So with the Indigenous outreach teachers, we've got 2 teachers at Alexander. We've got 2 teachers at Coheman. We've got this one teacher supporting Cowhigh and Quamachin. We've also got an additional teacher who is supporting students who are at Alexakin, Chemainus, and Crofton. That's a combination remote teacher and Indigenous outreach teacher. And then there's one teacher that was already in existence at Alexander that we repurposed, who's also supporting this. Great initiative. We've also have one of our itinerant Indigenous Ed teachers is supporting 2 families in Malahat Nation in the same capacity and an Indigenous outreach capacity. Big difference between the remote and the Indigenous outreach is the remote teachers are actually going to community, they're going to homes, they're supporting kids face-to-face In addition to those who are ready for some virtual or online, they're supporting that as well. But the big difference is we're doing face-to-face visits with this Indigenous outreach positions. There's that one. I want to also just chat briefly about Indigenous knowledge sessions that you may have heard about. We fired these up at the beginning of October. We started sessions on Wednesday and Thursday for Indigenous Ed staff, for exempt staff at the board office, and also for our principals and vice principals. As we were doing these sessions late last year, we were hearing from community or from our teachers and our EAs that they would like to participate as well. So we're going to be starting on November 5th. We just put this email out to the entire system. Indigenous knowledge sessions will continue on starting November 5th until June from 3:30 to 4 o'clock. Charlie, are you with us now?
I'm here.
Awesome. I brought a special guest appearance, Charlie Coleman, to join us because he has a big hand in our Indigenous knowledge sessions. Do you want to explain a little bit about what's happening and what your role is?
Yeah, sure. So they started last year and I just kind of inherited this when I joined at the beginning of this year. We try to keep the Indigenous knowledge sessions to 30 minutes so that people know they're just giving up a half hour of their day. It's interesting to try to keep to that time. It's tough. And we originally had Wednesday morning and Friday morning. And now, as Larry said, we're adding the Thursday after school because we had a lot of people wishing they could join, but 30 minutes in the middle of class time is kind of tricky for a lot of folks. So in the 30 minutes, we always start with Dolly. She does an acknowledgement and a welcome. And then she does a little bit of Hulkaminam language instruction. She never knows for sure who's going to be in the group, so she adjusts the language lesson as she sees who signs up for Zoom. So we're actually having some conversation about maybe we'll say the Friday one is for people who've been in some other sessions, and the Wednesday could be for more beginners, and then the after school one will probably be more beginners as well. So Dolly does a little bit of Hulkaminam language, and then one of our CTAs, our culture language advisors, knowledge keepers, will tell a story or a little bit of history or give us a little bit of historical and local knowledge and content. And then near the end, if there's time, I'll wrap it up with a bit of a provocation, get people thinking about Indigenous ways of knowing, really more around the ideas of an equity scan. How are we doing in terms of equity in our district? And a little provocation on truth and reconciliation. And they seem to be going really well. And like I said, we had more people wanting to do it, so we're offering the after school session as well.
Charlie. Yeah, very well received so far. Since I sent this out this morning, I got a fleet of emails coming back. Thank you. I'm going to be there from teachers and EAs, some clerical. In fact, I even had some requests. Can parents participate? I've got a community group I'm part of. Can they join in too? So right now I'm just saying, let's pause that. Let's wait a couple of weeks, see where it lands, see how busy we are, and then potentially open it up. Real positive feedback so far. So great stuff. And you have all met our lovely Dolly. Any session with Dolly is a positive session. And our cultural teaching advisors, they are incredible too. So anytime we can spend with them is valuable time. I did send it out to the everyone link. I'm hopeful that all of you would have received it. You're more than welcome to come and join us if you'd like to work on your Hulkaminam and learn about a little bit about local history and culture as well. District inquiry. Last year, we decided to park a few dollars to employ Hannah Morales, who was a TOC at the time last year, had done some previous work with open learning and DL. Hannah's a lovely lady we hired to do some interviews with students through all of our school district. She interviewed 60 students and asked some good questions. What's working in school? What isn't working in school? And how can we improve or enhance what we're doing to better meet your needs? both academically and culturally. And the feedback that we got was very positive, and I'll probably work with Robin to have give you a more comprehensive, I don't have a lot of time, but give you a more comprehensive report out of what we found in that. We still have a little bit more work to do. We're going to continue that work into this year. The next steps for us, we interviewed kids that are currently in school. Our next step, we want to interview kids who are disconnected from school and did not graduate. We want to know what we're missing. What are we missing in our buildings right now? What is it that we did do or didn't do that led to you becoming disconnected? So stay tuned on that. I'm giving you a sneak peek. School-based inquiries. So in addition to the district inquiry that we did, the UN Squalus, we also did some school-based inquiries with 7 schools. We targeted Chemainus Elementary, Chemainus Secondary. We also did Alexander, Coheman, Quamachin, Cow High, and Cowichan Valley Open Learning Co-op, CVOLC. What we did was we identified these schools as having high Indigenous student populations, and we gave them the task of interviewing students within their building to identify same kind of questions. What are you doing? What are we doing well here? What are some things that we need to improve? How are you enjoying your schooling experience? From that, we came back as a district to share what we'd heard and then start asking ourselves some tough questions. In the hopes of landing on 1 or 2 things you want to try this year to see if it has an impact on student engagement, student learning, attendance, retention, any of those things that you identified as something that you wanted to target. So each of the school landed on 1 or 2 projects that they wanted to try this year. We've given them some dollars to implement those projects for the year. And I've brought our lovely Charlie Coleman to talk about what CVOLC wants to try this year.
So yeah, when I was at CVOLC in the Grove last year and when this inquiry came up, we talked to the kids and the staff, and we had a couple of things, but the main one that we came up with was, if you've ever visited CVOLC in the old Duncan L, it's a beautiful heritage building, but it's also probably the most colonial looking building in our entire district. And so one of our priorities was to see, you can't change the building, it's a heritage building, but what can we do to have the building look and feel and sound more welcoming and more inclusive of all cultures, but in particular with this inquiry of our Indigenous cultures. And so working with the students, we're doing some signage and some artwork to increase the visibility of Indigenous artwork, Indigenous language, culture, and history, so that that beautiful old heritage building doesn't look and feel quite so colonial, and it's a little more welcoming and inclusive.
Thanks, Charlie. And each of the schools kind of landed on their own inquiry that they want to try to implement this year. All but Coheman they're underway with theirs. Coheman, because we've got 2 new admin there. Charlie and I are meeting with them next week to revisit their inquiry questions and make sure that it's still in alignment with the direction they want to go this year. Happy to get you the specifics on each of the schools' inquiries, but I just wanted to give you kind of a high look at it for now. Knowledge keepers. So we've got a new title. We're working on a new job description for our knowledge teachers, and we're getting to a great place with it. We've rebranded it to Hulkaminam Language and Culture Advisors. And they're very happy with the shift from, it used to be cultural teaching assistants. And as they're not really assistants and they're leading the teaching in the classrooms, we figured that this was a better job description. There's still a little bit of work to do around this, but we're getting to a really good place, and happy to announce that our Hulkaminam Language and Cultural Advisors, our knowledge keepers in our district, are kicking it off to a great start this year. We're gearing it up right now to do Zoom sessions with schools, and those schools that we can do it safely. Some of our our knowledge keepers will be going to schools to actually do some face-to-face in cohorts only though. So we're doing a little bit of work around that, trying to keep Indigenous ways of knowing alive and well in our elementary schools, supporting our elementary schools as best we can. We are doing some recording of our sessions too with our knowledge keepers, and as well as our Indigenous knowledges sessions, the Dolly sessions and our knowledge keeper sessions. We're going to be recording those and making those available for people who can't make the sessions. So yeah, so some positive things happening around that. Soutons, you've heard me talk about our Soutons before, and I'm so happy to announce that we're hearing lots of positive feedback from it already. Here's a picture of our Soutons, Kara. I don't know if you can see my mouse circling Kara here. This is Kara Michelle and Norm Thorne are our two Soutons at Cal High. Kara Michelle is our grade 10 Souton, which means that she's tagged to the grade 10 cohort. The kids that are scheduled to graduate in 2023, she's going to continue working with them for the next 3 years. What's really cool about Kara, as an indicator of how well the program is landing in our schools, she actually worked at Quamachin last year as a grade 9, she was with a grade 8, grades 9 as an Indigenous sport worker, an ISW. She went with them to Cal High this year. First day walking down the halls, nothing but beaming faces, happy students that they had a familiar face in the school with them as they landed in their first days at the school. So it's already very positively received. Norm is attached to the grade 11 cohort. You can see Rita in the back there. Rita George Green is our ISW. She's working with the grade 12 cohort right now. So it's a bit of a journey, but we're hoping for some positives to come out of this work that we're doing. And you can see off to the left here, this is Jolie LeBlanc. Jolie LeBlanc is our grade 9 Souton. So she's with the grade 9 cohort at Quamachin. And so next year, she's going to follow those grade 9s to grade 10, hopefully bridging that the transition between schools to hopefully help those Indigenous students land in a better way at the new buildings. One of the pictures I don't have here is of Francine Thomas. She's our last Souton, and she's in the grade 7 cohort working alongside all of our students who are at Coheman and Alexander, as well as all of the other Central Zone schools. So we do have the 4 Soutons right now. It's a pilot project. It seems to be going really well. We do intend on expanding on this next year to add 1 more Souton. Hugely positive impact already. So I'm going to continue to report out on this. This will be a big part of our initiatives moving forward in improving attendance and retention of our Indigenous learners. I'll add to this that because they're attached to cohorts, for example, Kara attached to the 2023 grads, any students who become disengaged, she's going to work alongside school staff and district staff to re-engage them. Any students who move schools, they'll still be part of her caseload. She's still going to track those students. We don't want any students left behind, no students that are lost from the schooling system. This is the full INED team here at Cal High with Loren here. I don't know why they're all looking back. Rita must have said something funny there. And that kind of concludes it. If I had more time, I would have dove in deeper, but I wanted to just hit a few of the things that we've identified in our strategic plan action items that we're working on to improve student engagement, student retention, academic results, as well as cultural and history. Yeah. Questions, comments, thoughts?
Thank you, Larry. That lost my screen as Miss Candace happens to. That was really great. I'm really excited about the Swoutons. They following the kids like that and having a set of eyes. We've talked about that off and on for a while now, and I think it's going to be an amazing thing. So thank you for sharing that, and hopefully you can keep us posted how that's going, because I think it's going to be amazing. Does anybody else have some comments? Trustee Spilsbury.
Yes, I just follow up how exciting this model is. And I assume that you're doing an evaluation as you go through and making adjustments at this point. But the thing that I really want to comment on is the tracking, because I think we have been hearing about the importance of tracking our students and, you know, lending support to them as we track them through whenever they need it, whether that be attendance or retention or academic, or I guess cultural. So it's very exciting, and I'm certainly looking forward to hearing about the performance data at the end of the year. Thank you so much, and to your team.
Thanks, Candace. HK.
Any other questions, comments? Trustee Hutchins.
Yeah, just I want to share my accolades as well to Larry and Charlie and their team. It's just very impressive. Thank you for all you do.
And any other comments? Well, thank you again, Larry and Charlie. It's impressive and it's exciting, and I just can't wait to keep hearing more. So Hutchka, we keep it up. Thank you very much.
HK. I look forward to coming back and talking data, Candace, talking about all the great things that are happening.
We can't wait.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Joanne, can I just go back to Glenn, or somebody maybe out? There was a fabulous motif that they had for the inquiry and design program. Is that our creation? It's pretty impressive. Mixture of the yin and yang and the triangle. Is that?
That's good. Yeah. Superintendent?
Yes, I believe it is ours, and it came from challenge-based classrooms. And here is Glenn to even answer further.
So that particular graphic comes from the challengebaselearning.org site, and there's an actual sort of guide that was developed, and that's the graphic that was developed to represent the philosophy.
Oh, well done. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, that takes us to Mr. Sandquist again, please.
Thank you. I'm going to share the screen and bring up an estimator of the funding as we see it likely to be announced for the September count compared to our September estimate, which was prepared by the Ministry of Education last March. So 1 second while I share here. And I think this is big enough to see. There's been some pretty significant shifts in our enrollment, so I wanted to show the board what those potential impacts are. And what I'm showing you here is the September estimated funding based on the 1701 count at September 30th. And this would be the March numbers. So what we thought was going to happen when we submitted our enrollment in February, and it was part of the grant. And I think what's important to note here is that overall, we look like we're down 33.315 students from the prior year. So that is only 0.4%. I think that is pretty impressive retention when I hear what's happening in many other school districts. And that is down 52 students from what we thought it was going to be. So I think that's the key here. So we thought we were going to grow slightly, less than 20 students, but in fact we went down by 33. But it's the redistribution of those students that's having an impact on our funding. And so what I want to highlight here is that a standard enrollment student in a classroom is funded at $7,560 per FTE. But a DL student is funded at $6,100, about 80%. And so what we see is our regular classroom enrollment dropping by 224 students. Continuing ed, which would be more the dual credit, dropping by just over 15. Alternate school growing by 14. But this redistribution of distributed learning going from 111.625 to 285.5, an increase of 173.875 students. So even though the funding is only down 51 from what we thought, that overall redistribution results in lower funding for DL and a drop in funding for our September to September count of $646,000. It's offset later on in this grant, but it's certainly I think this is going to be a pretty consistent story among school districts in the province, especially on the island. When I talk with my counterparts, is that there's been a shift from regular schooling to DL. And so the ministry is probably going to have some extra money left over as a result of that. And we'll see whether or not that comes to the districts later on in the year as part of a holdback. So the next part to look at is the shifts in the unique student factors, such as special needs. So here we see a growth of 20 level 2 students, which are the students that are made up by, predominantly that's our Gs or autistic students, for example, level 3 being behavior up by 17. So some significant changes in dollars coming in there with an additional 37 students with designations. We see the ELL, English Language Learner, dropping by 27 students, so losing some money there. And Indigenous education, and I may be off, I think this might actually be 1594 by the time it's settled out, but being up by about $43,500, up 29 students, which might actually be 27. And so overall, that offsets with an additional $564,000 in revenue. We got some other small factors, and so we see a drop of $91,505 as to what we would expect to be coming in. I think there's, that $91,000 is just the revenue component of pressure. We'll be required to increase the Indigenous education target by that 43.5. So overall, the budget impact is about $135,000. Off what we had originally submitted and received from the ministry. There's likely other pressures coming around servicing these additional students. So whether the board will need to consider putting additional resources in for those new designations is another thing to be considered that we need to work out. But overall, I think it's better than it could have been. The potential was here to be in funding protection and to have dropped $982,000, and that didn't happen. And when we came to you with some early enrollment numbers, they were 97 down, not 51 down from projection. So we've made up a lot of that gap through the reconciliation process of the 17-1. So I'm going to stop sharing and then be able to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Trustee Croft.
My question for Mr. Sandquist is, a lot of that has to do with restricted funding. So though we're not down overall a huge amount, certain line items are they not? Because we can't serve each child with that restricted fund.
Mr. Sandquist?
The only targeted funding that is restricted is in regards to Indigenous learners. So the other lines are the way that the board receives their funding, but you have discretion over how to allocate it. So additional funding is coming in due to designations. That's not how it has to be spent, but the money that's coming in due to additional Indigenous learners selecting an enhanced program that must be spent in that area. So that is the only restricted line item, and that is that $43,500 that has to go to that program.
Thank you very much.
Trustee Dolman?
With that increase to distributed learning, how have they handled that up there? Is it been relatively smooth, and how many new staff have we added there?
I believe we've added close to 5 staff to the department. Many of those staff have come through the federal dollars that have come in. That's how we've been able to accommodate that change, because we've also maintained the seats for students back at their regular schools as well. So we're kind of double funding space for those kids. So yeah, I think the total is 5 staff.
Thank you. Trustee Spilsbury?
Just a couple of comments. The first is, this is a success story for our school district. When I talk to other board chairs across the island, no one is saying that their enrollment is at 90%. plus students compared to last year. I mean, that in itself is the first pieces of the success. But the second piece, I think, is around the difference between the funding levels, between the number of students that have gone to DL for us, that has dropped our funding when we really, you know, in a way it's so unfortunate for us because we've kept our students, but we've dropped our funding because they've changed into DL. And I'm pretty sure our board will be trying to advocate around the change in funding for DL, because, you know, I don't know how they determine a funding level, but these are individual kids. They're all trying to be on a strong growth program. And that means that teachers are looking after them and supporting them, just would seem to me to the same degree as students in a classroom. So I don't understand the funding level. Perhaps you could explain it to me through the chair to Mr. Sandquist.
I cannot. I can tell you that there is a technical review committee made up of superintendents, secretary, treasurers, and Ministry of Education that work on these funding levels and how to allocate the overall block. I think what Trustee Spilsbury has expressed around boards advocating for that $6,100 to be $7,560 is something I am sort of hearing provincially. I believe that it's going to result in funding remaining with the Ministry of Education, because I know overall funding or enrollment provincially is down. And the ministry has a fixed pot of money, and they have allocated most of that already to boards, but they're going to be with money remaining because districts are shifting their students from regular to DL. So we may still recover some of that later. It just hasn't been determined yet by the ministry, but they do commit annually to allocating the full block to boards. So we may be in another one of those situations where we get those March grants or holdback grants that tend to emerge. But I suspect they're going to hold on to that a little bit for contingency for COVID. And when they feel that they need to get that released, which is the March 31st year end, again, the March grants that we used to call the Easter Bunny grants years ago, I would expect that we'll see something like that.
Trustee Spilsbury.
Just to follow up, I'm really glad that you have the vision that this may occur. I think that's great, but perhaps the board or the BEBC committee would like to recommend to the board that as a letter be sent to the ministry to enforce our position around the need to increase DL funding, and I'd make that a motion.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Trustee DeLourde. And any conversation on the motion? All those in favor? Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we will go back to Mr. Sandquist, international student travel.
International student program, I'm going to quickly share again and get to the provincial announcement that students are able to once again enter into the K-12 public school system. And we are one of the districts that are a designated learning institution. So I think that is good news for our term 3 or semester 2 intake, where we would expect the numbers that we currently have. I believe we have 65 students right now, to increase by a further 38 in the second term there. That still will fall somewhat short of our projection of 120 in the budget. And I'm just going to stop sharing here. I think everybody's seen the document, which will provide, create some lower revenues we do believe we have some contingencies in place to offset that, because 38 students coming in at half the year, that's only 19 students over the year if you want to annualize it as far as revenues go. Overall, I expect we'll probably be short around $200,000 overall in that program, which I still think is doing pretty well, given that the uncertainty around when students were going to be able to arrive here. And I know that many districts have seen much larger losses than our board have had in regards to retention of students. You know, a lot of districts sent all their students home, and so they started the year with no students. We were able to provide opportunities for the international students that kept them here in country for the summer and set us up in a much stronger position. So I just wanted to relay that is a bit of good news and a bit of hope for those students to be able to come back. We have strong quarantine procedures. We ran a quarantine camp out at the Lake Cowichan, I think it's called, not Cultural Center, Cowichan Lake Education Center, where we hosted the students in a fun summertime quarantine camp. I don't think it'll be as fun in January out there, but I'm sure they'll still have a good time. Maybe not so many marshmallow roasts, but they were able to be inspected and meet all the required quarantine requirements, which is why we were able to be certified for future student arrival. So I think good work to our department, and we're starting to recover. So that's the point of that.
Well, that's good news. Very good news. Are there any further comments? No, seeing none. Then we move on to the advisory committee meeting. Trustee Croft.
Thank you so much. So at our recent advisory committee meeting, we, of course, I think one of the larger topics was COVID-19, whereas we see, it was generally reported that the kids are adjusting. Kids are young and resilient, and they just have that kind of capacity for change. But we still find some of the staff, teachers are struggling. And largely, this may have, sometimes this has to do with underlying health conditions or having a personal bubble with people who have concerns. So there was kind of a refreshed call for everyone to be particularly diligent about all of the protocols that we have in place. It's not necessarily just to protect ourselves, but to protect our colleagues. So there was some conversation about that. So, I think it's not an unusual thing in a crisis to see the weight that the crisis puts on people, but to also see how exceptionally people rise to the challenge. And so that's where we are in Cowichan. We have students, teachers, staff, families doing exceptional things to keep their kids in the education system and make sure everybody's benefiting. And we have people carrying the weight of the extra energy that requires. We asked our committee to weigh in on our community care pledge, which the board is sharing and asking for feedback on, and will most likely sign in the near future. Well, sorry, guessing. I don't want to speak for you guys, but it looks like a good thing. And the superintendent put forward a request for input on putting into effect the board's strategic plan and board strategic priorities. Certainly much of this has been undertaken, but the plan is a living document and we continue to look for feedback. These were enormous questions for one meeting, so we will leave those things on the agenda, and I look forward to sharing the advisory committee's feedback on those matters at a future time. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more business? Seeing none, I said the meeting be adjourned. We have a motion? Yeah. Trustee Croft, seconded by Trustee DeGroot, and all those in favor. Thank you.